My name is Kelly, and 2 years ago my life was shattered when I discovered that my husband, Scott, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. The man I had trusted with my heart, the one who promised to love me forever, was having an affair with my younger sister, Lauren. The pain of their betrayal was unbearable, but the final blow came when they had the audacity to send me an invitation to their wedding. It felt like a cruel joke, a twisted reminder that they had moved on while I was left to pick up the pieces of my broken life, but the betrayal didn't stop there. When my mother told me she would attend the ceremony, it felt like a knife twisting in my already wounded heart. How could she side with them after what they had done to me? I felt utterly alone, abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me the most. However, instead of wallowing in despair, I decided I would not let them get away with this. I had a plan to make them pay for what they had done. Scott and I had met at work, where I was his boss. He was new to the company, and I was responsible for his training. Despite his initial nervousness, he was sincere and eager to learn. We gradually grew closer, and one day he surprised me by asking if I was free on our next day off. It was the first time I saw him so confident outside the office, and it made my heart skip a beat. We started dating, and after 3 months, he asked me to be his girlfriend. Our relationship grew stronger as he became more skilled at his job, earning praise from his supervisors. When Scott got promoted and transferred to a different department, he proposed to me, and I happily agreed. Our wedding went smoothly, and my family, especially Lauren, welcomed him with open arms. Lauren, who was the same age as Scott, seemed particularly taken with him. She often remarked on how lucky I was to have married such a kind man, and how people at work held him in high regard. At the time, Lauren had just broken up with her boyfriend and was yearning for marriage, constantly expressing how envious she was of my happiness. As we settled into married life, I continued to support Scott, both at work and at home. I thought I was doing everything right, but about a year into our marriage, things started to change. Scott began coming home later and later, and we hardly ever had dinner together anymore. When I asked him if everything was okay at work, he brushed me off, saying nothing was wrong. But I could tell something had changed. He used to share everything with me, but now he seemed distant and irritable whenever I brought up work. Desperate to reconnect, I suggested we go to a spa together during our next holiday. Lauren had recommended a place to us, and I thought it would be a perfect way to relax and spend some quality time together. Scott seemed indifferent, but I went ahead and made the reservations anyway. A week before the trip, I reminded him, but he dropped a bombshell. He had to go on a business trip that same weekend. I was disappointed, but he insisted it couldn't be helped, so I canceled our plans. On the day he left for his business trip, I received a call from the hotel where I had booked the spa, confirming our arrival time. Confused, I realized my cancellation hadn't gone through. I decided to invite Lauren instead, thinking it would be a nice way to cheer myself up. But when I called, my parents said Lauren had been out since the morning. As a last resort, I invited my mother, who surprisingly agreed. It seemed she had noticed I had been down lately and wanted to support me. We arrived at the hotel, ready to enjoy our spa day, but what we witnessed instead was something I could never have imagined. There, walking arm in arm, were Scott and Lauren, entering the very hotel where we were supposed to stay. My heart stopped as I realized the woman my husband was with was none other than my sister. They looked so happy together, completely oblivious to the fact that they had been caught. I was in a state of shock as we drove back home. My mother tried to comfort me, but nothing could dull the pain of such a deep betrayal. Scott had been lying to me all along, and so had Lauren. They had been sneaking around behind my back, using his so-called business trips as a cover for their affair. The realization made my anger burn hotter than the sadness. The moment Scott returned from his trip, I was ready. I had already signed a new lease for an apartment and prepared the divorce papers. I left the papers and a letter for Scott, outlining the terms and letting him know that all further communication would be handled through my lawyer. I blocked his number and moved out before he even knew what hit him. I also made sure to keep my new address a secret, not even telling my parents at work. Scott and I still saw each other occasionally, but I ignored him completely. It didn't take long for him to agree to the divorce, understanding that he had no leg to stand on. Our colleagues seemed to sense what had happened, though no one spoke about it openly. The whispers and sideways glances were enough to let Scott know that his reputation had been tarnished. 5 years passed, and I kept my distance from both Scott and my family. I focused on rebuilding my life, and although the pain never fully disappeared, I managed to find a new sense of normalcy. But then one day, after finishing work, I returned home to find my mother standing in front of my door. She was holding an invitation to Scott and Lauren's wedding. They had finally decided to make their relationship official and were brazen enough to invite our parents. "Mom, are you going to attend?" I asked, my voice trembling with the effort to remain calm. "Of course I am," she replied, her tone surprisingly calm. "But don't worry, I have a plan. Just wait and see." On the day of the wedding, my mother called me through a video call. I didn't want to watch, but I remembered her words and stayed on the line. As the wedding ceremony began, a slideshow was presented, featuring photos of the bride. The MC introduced the slides, saying they were a collection of photos from Lauren's birth to the present, lovingly prepared by the bride's mother. I was shocked when I saw the first photo. It wasn't of Lauren, it was of me. The slideshow continued, showing pictures from my childhood, my school days, and even my wedding to Scott. The guests began to murmur in confusion, while Lauren's expression grew increasingly panicked. Scott, too, realized what was happening, his face turning pale as the realization dawned on him. My mother took the stage, smoothly taking over the presentation. She recounted how I had supported Scott, both at work and at home, only to be betrayed by him and Lauren. She then revealed the truth to the stunned audience, showing the photo of Scott and Lauren entering the spa hotel together. The room fell into a shocked silence as the guests finally understood the depth of their deception. Lauren tried to stop her, pleading with her to let it go. But my mother was resolute. She made it clear that she could never forgive them for what they had done to me. She left the venue with my father, leaving behind a room full of people who now saw Scott and Lauren for who they truly were. That day my mother did what I couldn't. She exposed their lies and made them face the consequences of their actions. When I spoke to her later, she apologized for bringing up painful memories, but I thanked her. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted off my shoulders. But I wasn't done yet. I had one more card to play. A few weeks later, during a company-wide presentation, I played the recording of my mother's speech at the wedding. As the truth about Scott's affair with Lauren was revealed to the entire company, the room erupted in whispers and accusations. Scott tried to defend himself, but it was too late. His reputation was in tatters, and everyone knew the real reason for our divorce. The board members, who had once seen Scott as a rising star, quickly turned against him. They informed him that he would be transferred to a remote office, effectively demoting him with plans to lay him off in the near future. Scott's career was over, and he had no one to blame but himself. As for Lauren, her life quickly unraveled as well. She had become a full-time housewife after marrying Scott, but when she learned about his transfer and demotion, she abandoned him without a second thought. She quickly latched onto another man, hoping to maintain her comfortable lifestyle. But this new man was a freeloader, and soon, Lauren found herself drowning in debt, working 2 jobs just to stay afloat. Watching Scott and Lauren's lives fall apart brought me a sense of closure. Their betrayal had led to their downfall, and they were finally paying the price for their actions. With this closure, I was able to move on with my life, free from the shadows of the past. I focused on my career, taking on new challenges and receiving a promotion in recognition of my hard work. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones, and even started dating again. I also took time to explore hobbies I had neglected, like painting, which brought me a sense of peace and fulfillment. Years passed, and I found myself happier and more fulfilled than I had ever been. Scott and Lauren were distant memories, reminders of lessons learned but no longer sources of pain. Their lives, on the other hand, continued to be marked by the consequences of their actions. Scott drifted from one low-paying job to another, never recovering his career, while Lauren remained trapped in a cycle of financial struggle, burdened by her new partner's debts. In the end, I realized that true happiness comes from living with integrity and kindness. Betrayal and deceit bring only temporary satisfaction, followed by long-term suffering. By choosing to live my life with honesty and compassion, I found the peace and happiness I had been seeking all along. And as I looked toward the future, I knew I was finally free to build a life on my own terms, without the weight of betrayal holding me back.